You may be seated.
What's up, Storyline? My name is Josh, and I'm one of the pastors here. And this week is one of the best weeks of the summer for us as a church family. Okay, let me tell you a couple of things. One, this coming Sunday, a week from today, we have our next membership class, which currently has over 100 people registered to think about taking their next step of becoming a member here at Storyline. Now, if you'll remember, just a few weeks ago, we had about 220 people in that membership class. So over 300 people in the last few weeks considering, thinking, and planning to take that next step of becoming a member. And there's still room for you if you'd like to be a part of that next Sunday. Second, this Sunday, today, is the only time that this will happen. But we have every person who's on an international mission trip is gone overseas this day. We have 50 people in places across the world sharing Jesus. Guatemala, Belize, South Asia. It's amazing. But we don't want to just share Jesus with the nations. We also want to share Jesus with our neighbors. And that means preaching the gospel, telling them the good news. It also means demonstrating God's love to them and what it means for God to love them. That it transforms us into people who serve. And so this Saturday, this is the last thing this week, this Saturday is our annual Serve Day. We are spending the day serving our community. We have 11 projects all over Arvada at schools and at local nonprofits and in local parks and neighborhoods. And we've got 600 slots available over those 11 projects. And right now, almost 450 people are participating in Serve Day this coming Saturday. And that means, don't clap yet, because this room could finish us out. That's what I hear when I hear that, is this room could finish us out. So if you want to register for that, we'll give you a free t-shirt, which I know is why you do everything in life, is for a free t-shirt. So take your phone, tap the seat in front of you, and there's a place there for you to register for Serve Day, but it's going to be a great week. Last Sunday, we began our Summer in the Psalms, and today we're going to continue that in Psalm 13. So if you have a Bible, I'd love to invite you to turn to Psalm 13. I love that we get to be a part of a church that is generous, not just with our finances, but with our time, to be able to share Jesus internationally and to be able to share Jesus with our neighbors. One of the things that I'm trying to do recently is to take a moment to be a better encourager in life, okay? So Storyline, I haven't had a minute with you, so let me encourage you for a moment that you are a resilient people. You are resilient. You are an encouragement to me, a motivation and inspiration to the people around you by the way that you are persevering through whatever life throws at you. I know we have people in our church family, brothers and sisters, even in this room, who have gone through some of the hardest things that a broken world forces us to experience. Just in the last month, we've had brothers lose a spouse, married for decades upon decades, and having to persevere and be resilient through that. We've had people experience something that I don't believe anyone should ever have to experience, the loss of a child, just in the last month. We've had people who are persevering and making it through the loss of the ability to walk and the loss of the ability to speak like they want to, and even a out of nowhere cancer diagnosis in the prime of life. All of this in the last month, and yet you persevere. And I know that you're not resilient because you have Storyline inside of you. You know, you're resilient because you have the Spirit of God inside of you. And as one of your shepherds, I want to spend today pastorally encouraging you in something that I've seen over the course of these conversations, not just in the last month, but over a period of years. You know, in the series that we're going through this summer in the Psalms, we're really trying to emphasize emotion and how every emotion in the human experience is represented in this book of Psalms. And an emotion that's essential to walking not just into, but through these terrible life situations is in the emotion of sorrow, of grief. That emotion is the right response to going through the brokenness of the world, but the question becomes, what do we do with it? Today we're going to see how David experienced his sorrow and then directed it to lament. That's really where we're headed. What is lament and how do we do it? Mark Vrogop is a pastor that defined lament as a prayer of pain that leads to trust. Hopefully, if you're a note taker, I'm going to have a few good things for you today. This is one of them, all right? If you're taking some notes, write this down. A prayer of pain that leads to trust. And in our hurting, in our suffering, in our sorrow, maybe in what you carried in here this very morning, I want to invite you into a prayer of pain that leads to trust. Vrogop, again, he says, to cry is human, but to lament is Christian. Do you know the difference? Because my goal today is that after our time together, you would have some handles for the difference and understanding what lament is. Look, today, if you're struggling, walking through something hard, maybe, God forbid, there's even a tragedy that's happened that no one else in this room knows about, then I want you to know that this sermon is for you. I want to help you to persevere, to hold fast, and to continue living in God's story by knowing Jesus and loving all people. But maybe that's not how you come in here today. You're not coming in here with a lot of sorrow and grief. And I want you to know this sermon's for you too, because I want to help prepare you. I want to give you the tools to lament so that they're there when you need them. I want you to understand God's heart for you, even when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And so I want to help you make the deposit now so it'll be there when you need it. So here, in Psalm 13, I want you to see how David laments, and then I want to give you, maybe weave in here some pastoral encouragements for how you can lament, and then I want you to see how Jesus is in your lament. So this is where we're headed today, how David did it, how you can do it, and how Jesus is in it. Let's read Psalm chapter 13 together. Let's read these 6 verses. I'll read it, and you can listen along. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I store up anxious concerns within me, agony in my mind every day? How long will my enemy dominate me? Consider me and answer, Lord my God. Restore brightness to my eyes. Otherwise, I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have triumphed over him, and my foes will rejoice because I am shaken. But I have trusted in your faithful love. My heart will rejoice in your deliverance. I will sing to the Lord because he has treated me generously. David's got a trajectory here in these 6 verses that I want you to check out. It's turn to God, complain. This might be the first sermon you've ever had a preacher tell you to complain, all right? So elbow the person beside you. I know some of you are like, I've been waiting for this my whole life. Turn to God, complain, ask, and trust. So turn to God, complain to God, ask of God, and trust in God. I want to invite you into a groundbreaking idea this morning as we think about turning to God. Maybe you got here and you're just trying to check this Christianity thing out. Somebody invited you, or you didn't really know how to say no, and so you just showed up to be nice. I want you to hear this specifically because I think the stereotype can be a little different. It is not a Christian idea to force yourself into smiling and acting like everything is okay all the time. Is that a safe place for us to start? It's not a Christian idea to force yourself into smiling and faking like everything is okay all the time. Christianity is not ibuprofen or Tylenol where it ignores the root cause and just kind of makes it feel okay for a little while. If I could disagree with my friend Karl Marx, Christianity is not an opium for the masses. Historically, it's universally agreed upon. The Christians have been at the front of the line, lamenting the brokenness of the world by fighting injustice and working to make better the plight of the poor and the marginalized, or calling out the corruption of governments. And here in our Bible, David in Psalm 13 gives us another honest look at what's wrong, not some religious pill to make it all seem better than it really is. Maybe you didn't know this. There are 150 unique, like individual psalms in the book of Psalms, okay? And 1/3 of all of those psalms contain lament. It's the highest subgenre of the psalms, higher than praise and thanksgiving and judgment and wisdom. There's even an entire book in the Bible called Lamentations. Christianity demands honesty, and that includes being able to authentically and honestly acknowledge that life is hard. There's a phrase, it comes from the translation in the early church into Latin of the Bible. It's coram Deo. It's actually from a translation in Psalm chapter 56. But it means before the face of God. And the idea here is that all of life is to be lived in the presence of God. Literally, it means before the face of God. But deeply ingrained in David's thought life was this idea that all of life is supposed to be lived before the face of God. You ask me, how do I know that? Well, as I'm reading through the Psalms, as you're reading through the Psalms, you're going to see every emotion of the human experience represented in this one book. Over and over, we see David turning to God with his emotions, with his circumstances, with his entire life, because he's living coram Deo. But as we think about the first step of this lament process, I think we miss this step of turning to God about 99% of the time. This first reaction of life is hard, I feel the sorrow and the grief, and I should be turning to God. And let's be honest, you have options. It's not like we just don't turn anywhere instead of turning to God. It's that we turn somewhere else. But he is the one who needs to hear your lament. Maybe not Facebook or Instagram. He's the one who can do something about it, not chat or Claude. What struggle are you going through right now, big or small, that today you need to begin addressing by turning to God? Because here's the little nugget of turning to God. Direction matters in lament. Does that make sense? Direction matters in lament. And it matters even more when you think about the second part of the lament process, which is complaining. So let's get down into the text as we move into complaining. You notice a phrase that's repeated over and over as we read those 6 verses, maybe as you're looking down at it right now. Verse 1, how long? Verse 1 again, how long? Verse 2, how long? Verse 2 again, God, how long? I think there's something spiritual even about how time passes when you and I are experiencing grief and sorrow. When we can't have the good desires of our heart. We have 4 kids. The 4th of our kids was born a monster, okay? If you see me, you see Amy, you're like, they're probably going to have pretty small kids, and yet we're talking over 9 pounds when Jordan was coming into the world, and just a few hours into his life outside the womb, while I'm dreaming of the center in my basketball starting lineup or the linebacker who's going to take the kid out, we realize quickly that his size was not because he was a monster, but because he was swollen. There were some problems with how his oxygen was, they didn't think he was getting enough to his brain, and the nurses whisked him away to the NICU in just minutes and hours of when we had him in our arms. And as we went into the NICU, as the time allowed for us to be able to see him, I don't know how to explain what he was in other than it was like an aquarium without water. I mean, just like this box that you could see into and wires and stuff. It was tough. It's kind of a staff joke that I get to help preach on emotions for us as a church. But I'm not the guy that's going to go in and just bawl crying. But that was tough for me walking in and seeing my kid like that. And as we looked at him, there was a sign that was on the aquarium, and it said, "Do not touch." Like, I get it. There's probably some parents that are going to rush in and be like, "That's my baby. I'm going to grab him." But I was like, "Guys, you didn't need to put a sign there for me. Like, I trust you. I'm not going to touch." And they said, "No, the sign there is not for you guys. Actually, because of how swollen he is and how small his veins are, we couldn't get the IV in. And so we poked him so much that we were worried about causing trauma. And so that note is for us, that we're not going to touch him." And in that moment, I know there are people in here that have experienced much worse, and God has been kind. There's a healthy 8-year-old running around here. But in that moment, I knew what it meant for time to stop, for time to pass so slowly that you ask, God, how long? Is he going to be in forever? Is he going to get better? What's happening? How long? Notice in verse 1 and 2, there's kind of a pattern to David's complaining when he's asking how long and will this pain ever end. He complains about God's actions, then he complains about his own actions, and then he complains about the actions of others, okay? Here's the 3 steps. First, he says, "Lord, will you forget me forever? Will you hide your face?" Now listen, as a preacher who has complained as one of the main points in his sermon, I feel like it's a burden on me to say God's people shouldn't be whiny. All right? I'm not trying to disciple you into being a grumbling people. We shouldn't show up to the mall and say, "God, I can't believe you didn't give me that good parking spot. It was right there." But life is hard, isn't it? Isn't it? Your life is hard. David's life was harder. Anyone have their boss throwing spears at their head? Anyone's son try to murder them? And yet David doesn't shy away from telling God how he feels about it. David isn't condemned for that. He's living his whole life before the face of God, coram Deo. And one of the things I appreciate about it is it's proof of a relationship between God and David, that he can communicate in this way. And one of the things I want you to hear this morning is God is inviting you into that type of relationship with him as well. But David doesn't just complain about God and to God. He also complains about himself. He takes stock. It's an honest evaluation of his own behavior. I'm worried about this, God. I'm in pain about this, God. Look at verse 2. "How long will I store up anxious concerns within me? Agony in my mind every day." Do you see this in your life? You holding on to emotions that are self-destructive? Since we're talking about emotions, I'm just going to step to the side for a second. Do you know that no one else can create an emotion inside of you? Have you thought about that before? No one else can put an emotion inside of you. Only you create your emotions. I got another thought for you here. Sorrow and grief, when we're experiencing these maybe small or maybe intense seasons of sorrow and grief, they affect you. You know this if you walked alongside somebody who's gone through this season. You see it can change someone. So if you put these 2 thoughts together, you create emotions that in turn recreate you. It's a powerful thing. Yes, hard and difficult and terrible things happen to you, but emotions are not one of those things. Emotions are how you react to those things. Which is why we say emotions are real, you feel them, but they're not always true. You should allow yourself to feel them, but you should not be governed or controlled by them. After David looks inward at himself and his own emotions, he looks out at others, into the world. At the end of verse 2, he says, "How long will my enemy dominate me?" David's acknowledging the scales of justice don't always line up in our eyes, or maybe more accurately, they don't always line up in our timeline. So David's basically saying here, God, are my enemies going to win forever? I'm the one losing here, God, and they're winning. God, I don't like this. It's not fair. This Isn't the honesty a little unsettling at this point? You feel a little uncomfortable that you're like, can he talk to God like that? Is that okay? I mean, he's basically saying, one, God, you're not killing it. Two, I'm not handling it very well. And three, the wrong people are loving it. It's like an evil McDonald's jingle. Like, it doesn't make sense that someone could talk to God like this. I got two thoughts about that. One, I love that it demonstrates God can handle your grief. God's not too brittle or fragile. If it helps you process it, he's not hearing anything he doesn't already know. He's waiting for you to bring your sorrow, your grief, your lament to him. And second, it shows us the Bible, again, it's not a book of fairy tales just trying to help us smile and feel better. If it was, you wouldn't put this in there, right? It contains honest wrestling with the sorrow and grief that can characterize the season of anyone living here in a broken world. And God, through Psalm 13, he's inviting you to live every part of that experience in his presence. So not only does David turn to God and complain to God, but he also asks. Look at the request he makes in verse 3 with me. Consider me and answer, Lord my God. Restore brightness to my eyes. Otherwise, I'm going to sleep in death. In multiple places in the Old Testament, the eyes are used as a representation of life in general. So it's not just, God, make my eyes better. He's saying something more than that. You got, when eyes had grown dim was kind of a euphemism for getting close to death in Deuteronomy, or my eyes are swollen with grief, making David feel like he was about to die in Psalm 6. And here, David's asking God not just to restore his eyes, but to restore life to his mind and his body and his spirit. He's saying, God, renew me, energize me, restore brightness to my eyes. And all the parents of infants in the room said, amen. And if you don't, God, David says, I have no other hope. Otherwise, I'm going to sleep in death. Verse 4, my enemy will say, I have triumphed over him, and my foes will rejoice because I am shaken. Now, this is where sorrow, grief, and lament is a true gift. You haven't heard me promise any silver linings to suffering or to lament, but this is the place, okay? Yes, it's hard, but it's also a gift. Sorrow and grief is a gift that gives us clear eyes to see the reality of our dependence on God. Where do you feel pain or suffering right now? Or maybe if you're not right now, you look back and you can see a season where your sorrow was at an all-time high. That level of dependence, of asking and begging God, is the reality of your dependence on God in all things. The thing that you are most desperate for God to change is the most accurate measure of your need for God in all of life. Another way to think about it is that pain doesn't create dependence, it reveals it. Suffering doesn't cause your need for God, it allows you to see it. Maybe to feel it, if you will. That's what makes me say it's a mark of maturity in your discipleship to be able to say that the sorrow I feel right now is pointing me to a greater truth, that I am dependent upon you, God, for everything in my life. And for you to have that kind of bold faith, that kind of statement through suffering and sorrow, you need the fourth part of David's lament here, which is trust. I think it's pretty incredible. After turning to God and complaining, after asking God, then we get this statement of trust in verse 5 and 6. Look at this. But I have trusted in your faithful love. My heart, it will even rejoice in your deliverance. I will sing to the Lord because he has treated me generously. Now, this is a hallmark of lament in the Psalms. This pivot, this turn that lifts David's eyes from the pain, from the turmoil, from the suffering and the sorrow, and instead it plants his feelings firmly on the character of God. If you'll let me give you a poor man's summary of lament here, I think it's allowing yourself to have feelings, allowing yourself to experience those feelings, bringing them into the presence of God, seeing them as real but not always true, and planting them firmly on the character of God, trusting that He is good, that He is loving, and that He is powerful. Here's what we want you to see this summer. As we go through the Psalms, we want you to see David's whole life lived in the presence of God, bringing his doubts, his questions, his hurt, his pain, his requests and needs and emotions, and entrusting them to God. But there's also a chance you could take this the wrong way if you check out on me now. So hang in, because the action step here is not to be more like David, all right? As great of an author and as a king he was, David's not the hero of the story. You know, I think if you thought you were just sick and you needed some medicine, then I think you could see David as the answer. You could think, you know what? I just need a hero of the faith, somebody to look up to. And if I could just follow them, it'll all be good. Or if you thought generally you were a good person, and I just need a fresh take, a fresh perspective that just gets me going, that I just need to bring out some of the goodness inside of me and I'll be all right, then yeah, I think David could be the hero of your story. But that's not the truth. The reality is that your need goes a lot deeper than a good example or a fresh perspective. As the great theologians 21 Pilots would say, maybe you don't fix and you like it like this. You have chosen to disobey the Almighty King, the everlasting God, the completely good Father. You've broken His commandments, so have I. You've lived a selfish life, so have I. And the Bible tells us there's no amount of good works that can earn our way back. Those sins have separated you from God. And since God is the author of life, life flows out of Him. He's the giver of all good gifts. Then if you are separated from God, you are separated from life. And do you know what word we use to describe someone who has been separated from life? Dead. You are dead in your sins. You don't need to go from broken to fixed or from sick to healthy. You need to move from dead to alive. You need a resurrection. Think about Jesus now and His journey through this lament in Psalm 13. David, he says in verse 1, "How long will you forget me?" But Jesus, as He's hanging on the cross in Mark 15, He's got a more desperate question. My God, why have you forsaken me?" While David was worried that his enemies would gloat, and he said he wanted to be saved from death in verses 3 and 4, Jesus knew his enemies would say, "I have triumphed over him." Jesus knew his foes would rejoice, but only for 3 days. Because as Jesus was freely giving His life away, breathing His last on the cross, He completely trusted the Father to restore brightness to His eyes. Otherwise, He would sleep in death. And because Jesus trusted in His greatest moment of pain, you and I get to experience the shout of resurrection joy over an empty tomb. You see, Jesus isn't just our good example. He's the hero of our story. He's our hope. He's our Savior, our righteousness, and our rescuer. By His death in our place, He offers you the gift of dying to your sin. Do you hear that gift? By His death in your place, taking on the punishment for sin, He's now offering you the gift of dying to your sin. And by his resurrection to life, he's now offering you a chance to be born again. We sang a song at the beginning of this service that says, death is dead. And if you believe that, then every trial, every sorrow, every grief becomes light and momentary because you know death is dead. Jesus has conquered it, and now you will suffer for a little while, but one day you will live forever in heaven. And that life with Jesus starts now and then lasts forever. So I ask you, have you received that gift? You might be here this morning and say, I don't really know if I've received that gift. And I want to offer you a chance to do it. Tell him right now, God, I can't earn my way back to you. I want to receive the gift. I want to repent. I want to turn from my sin. I want to die to my sin. And I want you to resurrect me. I want you to give me a new heart. I want to be born again. Have you received the gift? One way you should evaluate that question is by asking if your response to sorrow and grief is to lament. Do you turn to God? Do you have a relationship with him where you can voice your complaints, where you can ask for his help, and where you trust in him, ultimately claiming through every grief and every sorrow that Psalm 13:5 is true? I have trusted in your faithful love. My heart will rejoice in your deliverance. Because we as God's people, we desperately hold to this gospel, this good news that Jesus lived a life without sin, that he died in our place, that he defeated Satan, sin, and death by raising again 3 days later so that anyone who believes will be saved. And Storyline Church, then you and I will sing to the Lord because he has treated us generously. In the gospel, we find grace to live all of life before the face of God. In the gospel, we find grace to live life coram deo, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And just as Christians have for thousands of years, we will continue to be resilient in the face of our sorrow and our grief and our suffering. We will remain resilient, and in a word, people of God, we will lament. Would you guys stand and worship with us?